Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show, and with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He has competed for the WWF/WWE in the mid-'80s and has worked a variety of different opponents over the years. Pleased to welcome the one, the only Big Ron Shaw to the show. Welcome, Ron, to Wrestling with Heart.
Hey, thank you, Stanley, for inviting me on your show, and I'm looking forward to it as we are going to be going into different directions instead of all wrestling. So that will be really nice for a change.
Yes. So tell me about your childhood. Where are you from?
Originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and moved here to Florida in 1999 because I can't stand the cold snow.
Yeah, it definitely snows a lot up north.
Yeah, and from where you're from too, Tennessee, right?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit there.
Not as much, but
okay.
we get some.
All right. Yeah, it's nice area up there. There's some nice acreage up there, which I have looked into, but I just don't think I'm ready to pull the trigger on that.
Well, was wrestling ever something you grew up watching as a kid? Were you athletic growing up, playing sports? How did you get involved with wrestling?
Well, I never heard of professional wrestling until I was 8 years old. And I had a cousin who was just starting his practice as a medical doctor in Camden, New Jersey. And he was invited to be one of the attending physicians at a convention hall wrestling show in Camden, New Jersey. And he had tickets for me, my father, and I think two of my other uncles. So we all drove down to the matches, and I was sitting almost front row, and I'm watching these big behemoths throwing each other all over the ring. And then during intermission time, my cousin took me into the dressing room, which was really unique. So I'm standing there at the door, and I'm seeing legends like Crazy Luke Graham, Bull Ramos, Earl Maynard, Mr. Universe, Dominic DeNucci, and Chief J Strongbow, Toro Tanaka at the time. And I started looking at this, and I said, wow. I said, this is a pretty cool thing, you know? So we watched the rest of the show, and on the way home, we're driving back to Philadelphia, and one of my uncles asked me, and I was 8 years old, and he asked me, he goes, hey, Ron, what are you going to be when you grow up? You know, kidding around. I said, I'm going to be a wrestler. You know, and ever since I had gotten home, I watched wrestling every Saturday, and I couldn't get enough of it. And I just kept on watching. And next thing you know is I'm in high school, and I'm able to go down to the Philadelphia arena where they were doing the TV tapings, and they were doing the house shows down there. And in the meantime, while I was in high school, I was training to be a wrestler, I thought, you know, and that was still my aspirations, to be a wrestler. You know, going to a lot of those matches, and then they moved to the Philadelphia Spectrum and so forth. But that is how I got very interested in it.
I'd imagine, you know, being around all these different athletes, you have to be starstruck.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, this was larger than life. I mean, you know, these guys, they were huge. I can remember standing in that little hallway there at the door, and Crazy Luke Graham was coming out, and you know, he's a 6'6" individual, big guy, and as he's coming out sideways with his belly, he kind of like bumped me, if I can remember that. You know, funny how many years ago this was, you know, and I can remember some things, and some things I just can't remember. And I have a lot of people who are doing these podcast shows who invite me on, remind me of a lot of things. I said, that's correct. That is absolutely right, you know. But yeah, I was starstruck right from that moment.
So that moment was when you knew you wanted to be a wrestler. You'd been watching it for a long time, going to shows. I'd imagine training to be a wrestler is just so intense because you are just dealing with a lot of different obstacles put in your way. It's a different kind of physical work, but you were you an athlete growing up? Did that prepare you at all for?
Absolutely. I mean, that was all on my mind. In high school, in the probably my first year of high school, we would have this. They would call it this athletic competition where you would get scored on once a year. And I can remember that I couldn't climb those ropes, not even with my feet. I was so weak. Okay. And it was one thing that I wanted to conquer. So they started taking us into the weight rooms. Okay. They had a universal gym in our high school. And I would go there after school, after classes were done. I'd go there and work out. And I'm working out and I'm working out. And then maybe it might have been about 3 months later. Uh, I'd go into the gym and try climbing that rope. And son of a gun, I had the strength to climb that rope without my feet, which was amazing. But that was part of my training because, as I say, I was still in the back of my mind that I was going to be a pro wrestler. So I trained and I trained, and I didn't expect to be this big, humongous guy, but I was 6'3". Okay. And I was about 240 pounds. Okay. And we would go down, as I said, me and a buddy of mine, we would go down to the Philadelphia arena. And I think I was in my last year of high school. And I told my buddy, I said, you know something? I have to go into the box office there where Phil Zacco, who was the promoter, I don't know if that name rings a bell to you. He was always walking around. He had this kink in his neck. He had his old fashioned hat with a tie and a suit and everything. And I went into the box office and I said, Mr. Zatko, I said, I'm very interested in becoming a professional wrestler. Okay, this is my first leap, my first attempt, and didn't know what he was going to say. And I guess he took a look at me, and me being a pretty big guy at that time, he says, yeah. He goes, let me give you a school in Reading. So I don't know. I guess he meant Reading, Pennsylvania, or could have been Reading, Massachusetts, because that's where Killer Kowalski had his school. So anyway, so he's writing down that information. And I decided to say something which I probably regretted right after that. And I said, "Yeah, Mister Zacco, I love this sport." I said, "I know there's a lot of flash and and flair and making it look real." And right there, he
Sports and
dropped his
glamour.
pen, and he says, "You got a lot of nerve. These guys are hurting themselves every single night, and you come in here to tell me that." And he threw me out of the box office because I guess he kind of thought that I was going in there to try to find out some information about whether it was real or not. So he was doing his job of protecting the business. And I said, "Oh boy." I said, out I went back to my seat and sat down quietly, watched the rest of the show. And that was my first experience of trying to get into the business. The second time was Killer Kowalski was advertising his school on a TV show. They call it like a evening edition of different types of things that people like to do in their lives. And I was upstairs working out, and my mom yells up to me. She goes, "Hey, Ron," he goes, "Killer Kowalski's going to be on this show." So I ran right down there, and he was advertising his school, okay, to become a professional wrestler. So I said, this guy's a big name. I've watched him so many, many, many times. And I called up the station. They gave me his phone number, and I called him, and he says, "Yeah, come on up, and we'll talk." That was my second attempt to be a professional wrestler, and I didn't have to go any further from there.
Do you remember any of the drills that you practiced learning early on and any pieces of advice that you got from your trainers?
Trainers, as far as who would you say?
Just people that you learned from starting
Um,
out.
Well, as I mean, other wrestlers.
Yeah, wrestlers, trainers that you've had
Um,
to.
okay, yeah, training. I was pretty much very knowledgeable of training. I mean, it helped me being big boned and 6'3". I just had to put the body mass on, so I knew how to do that already. And eating. I mean, eating. I didn't discipline myself in eating. I ate whatever I wanted to eat. You know, and so I put on that size. I was 240, uh, I just went on from there. I did everything myself. There was really nobody helping me. I mean, Killer Kowalski did advertise that uh, nutrition and so forth because he was a vegetarian.
Mm.
Okay, so after training, maybe once a week, he'd take us out to the pizza place. There we have pizza and salad. So he was disciplined himself, but he didn't want to push any of that on us.
Yeah, I'd imagine, when you're a wrestler or just an athlete in general, you have to stay on a regimen, like a diet, so that you stay in shape because you're this
Yeah,
big, muscular, having the physique and everything. So you have to, maintain that figure.
right. Exactly. And you got to remember one thing about professional wrestlers and even any type of wrestlers, amateur wrestlers. Professional wrestlers were any size. They were fat, they were skinny, they were everything, you know. But that's what made a distinct difference between certain individuals and myself. It's like when I was there, it wasn't already by not late 1980, and I started working for Vince in June or July. Already on the TV tapings, he was calling me Big Ron Shaw, and he's the one who gave me the Big Ron Shaw. Okay, and that's because being 6'3", and at that time I was still putting on weight. I mean, I got up to about 260 and 270 at times in 84, 85. I was that heavy, and and being one of the biggest guys there. I mean, put aside Tony Atlas, he was a bodybuilder, and maybe a couple like Ernie Ladd, guys like that. But I mean, the majority of the guys I worked with were 2, 3 inches shorter than me, and that's where the name Big Ron Shaw came in.
Okay. Now, yeah, you'd mentioned just a second ago that Vince gave you the nickname. Tell me about how you got signed by WWF.
No, this was very easy. I mean, there was no question about it. When I was in my last week training up in Reading, Massachusetts. Well, it was actually Salem, Massachusetts. Walter lived in Reading, which is just basically next door. We were training at a YMCA upstairs on the second floor. And I went up to Walter and I said, "Hey, Walter," I said, "How am I doing?" I go, "You're doing great." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You're like you know what you're doing. You're not shy." And so, because Walter put on a couple shows, in these little bars and so forth to give you that experience. Plus, I did go work up in Vermont. Angelo Savoldi needed a couple guys undercard show, and he sent me and another guy up there. So that little bit of experience. But he says, "You're doing great." And one thing that was certainly on my mind was that I want to go work for the biggest company out there. I could have taken Walter's advice and say, "Hey, Walter," I said, maybe, can you hook me up going somewhere else? Because he sent some guys to Puerto Rico in his early days of his school. And I wanted to go work for the WWF, take my chances. I know how I was going to start out, but that's where the money was. Okay. So he says, "Okay." I said, "I want to go work for the WWF." He says, "Okay." 2 weeks later, or maybe even a week later, I get a call from Gorilla Monsoon. He says, "Hey, Ron, can you come up to Allentown and we're going to do the tapings there?" I said, "Yeah, sure. I'll be there. And my very first match was up against Tony Atlas. I don't know if I worked another match that night because they would do 3-hour tapings, and then the next night they go to Hamburg and do All Star Wrestling, another 3 hours of taping. I wasn't invited to go to All Star Wrestling until maybe a month later. So that's where I went there, and I started. One thing about me is that I listened to people. Okay, I didn't go in there pretending I'm a veteran. Okay, I didn't pretend I was this guy. I was just Ron Shaw. Okay, and I would sit down And guys like the Grand Wizard come up to me and give me a little bit of advice, which was very encouraging. And then you got a lot of guys who were joking around with me too, and which was a good thing. They took a liking to you. Okay. And so the next thing you know is, like I said, they're calling me Big Ron Shaw, and then I'm able to work with people, and they can see that. So that's why I would then keep coming up myself, and it became automatic. Okay. And then it wasn't probably 3 months later that I was wondering what was happening, because at the one of the tapings in Allentown, Arnold Skolin would say, "Hey, Shaw, I got a payoff for you from Madison Square Garden." Oh, what? I said, I didn't work in Madison Square. I never worked in Madison Square Garden. He goes, don't worry about it. You're with the team now. So they would give maybe a handful of guys a payoff from Madison Square Garden who didn't work there, and that was me. I was one of those guys. So that's when I realized, okay, I'm with the company now. So to jump ahead, I went back to Vince a couple of times. I was fired once by him because they gave me a great advantage in 1981 of making me the executioner. And I worked as the executioner all of 1981 and as Ron Shaw. I got several of those matches on my website. And they were going to send me out to California for Mike LaBelle, and I chose not to go. So that's when Vince let me go. But I came back a year and a half later after working with the independent promotion of international wrestling.
What was the reason why you didn't want to work in California?
Well, well, number one, it was going to be, the money was the first part, because, this may not sound like a lot, but 1981, I made $92,000. Okay. Because I was working all the house shows, Madison Square Garden and so forth. And I started asking a few people, getting their opinions of, hey, Vince is going to send me out to LA. Well, I asked SD Jones, I asked Bob Backlund, and I asked Kowalski. Kowalski said, it's not a good idea to go out there. And Backlund says, you're not going to make no money out there. And SD Jones kind of said the same thing. You're not going to make no money out there, but give Vince a call. He'll send you a check every week. He knew this from experience and knew it from other people. And I was still back and forth on it. And, I went to Monsoon when we were working a spot show, and I said, Gino, I'm definitely not going to go. I just definitely not going to go. And I didn't know if that was the right thing to say or what. I could have maybe should have went. But at that time, I was green and thinking that, okay, I'll still stay here, make some great money, Well, we were on a tour up in upstate New York, and we were doing the Utica, Syracuse, Buffalo, Rochester tour. And I was on the last night of the tour, and I was told to give Vince a call. And Vince said, Ron, I understand you don't want to go out to LA. I said, that's correct, Vince. And he says, okay. He goes, look, make tonight your last night. And I kind of expected that. So it wasn't really a hard blow to me. And I said, well, listen, Vince, I said, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I hope I can come back one day. And left on a good note, but, his father was still in charge at the time, and his father really liked me. He liked Kowalski, and he liked the fact that I was trained by Kowalski because, before the executioner thing happened, Mr. McMahon Sr., and I always refer to him as that because he was quite a gentleman. And he called me down in the dressing room one day. He goes, Ron, he goes, you're a natural at this. And that was the highest comment anybody could receive from this man. And he asked me, am I able to travel? And I kind of thought I was traveling already all over the territory, but he meant all over the world and the country, because they didn't have the territories at the time, And I told him yes. And that's what that was about, becoming the executioner and going out to LA. And I probably turned down a great opportunity, because the last night Skolin came up to me and he said, he goes, Ron, he goes, that's a shame you didn't go. He goes, you were supposed to work with Andre out there. You're supposed to go to Mexico and then go to Japan. Now, I don't know if he's making me feel worse or that was the actual plan, So, okay. To this day, I'll never know what happened, but I made a career of 20 years out of this business. So,
Yeah.
and I made money. I made money there. And when I made money with Vince, I also invested it, which really helped me out.
You got to work against so many different people over the course of your career. Who have been some of your favorite opponents that you got to work with over the years?
A lot of the guys that I enjoyed working with, and you have to take TV off the table. TV is what it is. But in house shows, I loved working against SD Jones, Salvatore Bellomo, Jose Luis Rivera. Um, and there's several others because it's in the house shows. It's not necessarily Hulk Hogan against Ron Shaw. We are the undercard. So there were a lot of guys on the undercard that I like to work with. And there were a lot of big names I worked with in Madison Square Garden. I had a match against Dusty Rhodes there. That was all 2 minutes of that match. I worked a match against Mil Mascaras as the executioner. Uh, and those are some of the two matches that just were not that good because they just displayed their thing, and then that was it. 1, 2, 3, and same thing with Mascaras. His leap off the top rope with all the photographers around the ring, and that's what they wanted to see. So actually, with the bigger names, I didn't have such great matches with, except one, Pedro Morales. Every time I worked with Pedro in house shows, they were great matches. I mean, he understood that how many times I worked with him on TV, it was time for him to do some selling for me. Throwing him over the top rope, hitting him over the head with a chair. I mean, he's the one who called those things. You wouldn't necessarily see that in an undercard match, but he gave back. So those are some of the handful of guys, and there's many more.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier at the top of the podcast you were wrestling for until the late '90s. Do you keep at all tabs on the current product today? Any thoughts on the current product as far as staying in tune?
It is, in my opinion, garbage. I guess maybe I'm being too harsh. It doesn't interest me one bit. I stopped watching it. Oh, maybe at the last time I watched it was maybe in the '90s. That was pretty much it. Yeah, every time. I mean, it's so story laden that I can't take it. The camera happens to be here every time something's happening. And, what we were used to back in our day, being old school, is that, you didn't go there, but you kind of did have that. And it was a little bit more believable in a way, it's a shame because you'll never see the professional wrestling ever again, from my time. And no, but no, it doesn't interest me one bit. I mean, I'll go through the guide on TV I see there, and I just keep on going. I don't even want to know what's going on.
Well, let's switch gears and talk about some of the stuff that you've done outside of wrestling. I know you've been involved with a lot of different charity organizations, have done a lot of stuff outside of the business as far as giving back. What kinds of things have you done over the years to help out in your community?
Well, what we have done. I live in Cape Coral, Florida, which is the largest city in Southwest Florida, and it's just outside Fort Myers. And we never had any children, me and my wife. When I moved down here in 1999, she was able to transfer from her job. Okay, she was a banker for a extremely large company, and she did some traveling down here, pretty much. And we talked about maybe having a kid, and neither one of us were strong on having it. She was enjoying her career, and I'm enjoying just. I was out playing golf many for years. Before I actually took a job driving for the post office. Tractor trailer, and uh, what we and we never did have any kids down the road. But I said, something, we want to do something for children. And a lot of children, young children, are suffering today, and no matter what it was. And as I say, in 19 or 2000, well, maybe it was when I was 35, 36 years old. I'm actually looking for my age, not the year. I invested the money that I made with Vince, and my father was a huge investor in the stock market. He showed me how to invest, and I made a lot of money. And when I was in my mid 30s, I said, you know something? I said, I don't think I got to worry about money anymore. Not unless I'm just plainly stupid. And down the road, we said, why don't we start donating? Okay. So we looked at children's hospitals, and we talked to some of the administrators and so forth. And we set up a yearly thing. So we donated for years to Nemours Children's Hospital in Orlando, St. Joseph's Children's Hospital in Tampa, and that was for quite a long time. And then we had a children's hospital open up here in Fort Myers, Golisano. So then we decided to stop donating to those two, and since this hospital is now in our community, we started donating here. Okay, and so we still are donating. We also, during these terrible hurricanes that we've had here in Florida, we've donated to the Red Cross. Okay, and I'm not talking about $10 or $15 either. I think we are pretty generous in what we were doing. And as far as actually physically going out to churches and help, and they have plenty of help out there. They're great people that give their time, and they do this. And believe me, there's some churches in our area that can go out 5, 6, 7 blocks, and we can even talk a couple miles. They're in good hands, those people. And but that's what we do, and that's what we continue to do today.
Well, was there like a moment for you that just touched your heart as far as helping someone out or giving back?
Does it make us feel good? Is what you're saying?
Was there a particular moment or particular time when you were helping someone out that was just very heartwarming for you?
Well, it's always heartwarming when you write a check. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, money is what people need most of right now, and that buys help for them. And so that's the way we chose to do it, and we were very appreciated. Matter of fact, I think it was just before the COVID broke out. We were invited up to Orlando because the hospital up there was doing a thank you luncheon for all the donators, and I was part of it. There were Tampa Bay hockey players there, some Florida Panther people there, and a whole bunch of other sports celebrities, but I didn't know them, and I was very fortunate that the person there who was doing the pictures for the papers happened to pick me of all people, professional wrestler out of some real big names that were there that day. And uh, but yeah, I mean, that's what it was all about. It was a great thank you, and we appreciated them inviting us and giving us a little award.
Well, why do you feel passionate about giving back to your community?
Um, it's we both look at each other when we see these stories on TV, how children are suffering, and we get that all the time. Kids with cancer. I mean, such at an early age, and then when you hear that the kid has beaten cancer, and I'm talking like a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old children, and we look at each other and say, maybe we were a little bit a part of that, by donating and helping out, because to cure cancer is so expensive these days. And you have to thank such greats like Jack Nicholas, who has Nicholas's Hospital, also in the West Palm Beach area, and Danny Thomas, their hospitals and so forth. But it's a very great feeling. It's good. You feel good at the end of the day. I mean, really do.
Absolutely. Just takes only one person to make a difference.
That's true. Very true.
Yeah. Well, Ron, this has been great getting the chance to speak with you about your career and the stuff that you've done outside of the business. You've got a website you had plugged earlier. Where can people find more about your career and check out all the great stuff you're doing?
I'm always adding something a couple times a year, usually in March and September, but they can go to www Big Ron Shaw, WWF.com. And I've got a lot of stories, podcasts, posters, all my matches. I'm still putting on some great ones. I'm going to be putting on one, I think, with Mil Mascaras from Madison Square Garden as the executioner, maybe in March or September. I also may be heading up to Boston in September for the International Wrestling Federation Hall of Fame reunion, which I became a member of in 2022. And I'm very proud to be a member there. And they can see everything and anything over there. But I also have my own YouTube channel. So people can go onto my YouTube channel there. And that's just the videos only. But everything is on my website. All types of write-ups and stories that people have been very nice to me when I got this website up in 2015. So there's a lot of write-ups and more stuff to come.
All right. Be sure to check that out. Thanks again, Ron, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Hey, thank you for the invite, and I'll be happy to come back.
All right. Take care.
All right.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.